Hello and welcome to another presentation of Weir Wednesdays as we explore the Weir collection at RiverBrink. As we saw with our discussion in the previous post, the Samuel E. Weir collection at RiverBrink includes many works by non-Canadian artists, and today we head to the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Maine to look at Landscape by the Sea, a view from Monhegan Island, by US-American artist Rockwell Kent. Rockwell Kent was an artist, a printmaker, an illustrator, an author, and an adventurer. He was born in 1882 in Tarrytown, New York, and studied architecture at the School of Architecture at Columbia University. He also studied painting with Robert Henry and William Merritt Chase at the New York School of Art. Among his classmates were Edward Hopper and George Bellows. Encouraged by Henry to attend the summer artist colony on Monhegan Island, Kent visited the island in the summer of 1905, the year of our painting. Kent lived on the island through 1910 and built a home and studio there. And here I'm showing you a vintage photograph and a more recent photograph of the home as it still exists. It's now included in the National Trust for Historic Preservation of Artist Historic Homes and Studios. Here we're looking at a view out toward the Atlantic from the studio. If we were standing on the site and turned slightly to the left, we would see a view of the neighboring islands, Manana, Smutty Nose, and Little Smutty Nose, seen here in this painting, Winter, Monhegan Island, in the collection of the Met in New York. It's thought that Kent arrived on Monhegan by ferry in June of 1905, although it's possible he made his first trip the previous fall. 45 years later, in his autobiography, It's Me, O Lord, Kent described his first impressions of the island. He was struck by the austere beauty of Monhegan, but also by the strength and resilience of the year-round inhabitants, the community of lobster fishermen. Kent admired them for their knowledge of boats and the sea and weather. While on the island, Kent also worked with his hands and experienced the life of a laborer for the first time. It made a lasting impression. It was during this first period on the island that Kent found his voice as an artist. And here we're looking at another one of Kent's paintings from this same period, Island Village from 1909. He developed his unique, bold style and captured the rugged shoreline of the island on canvas. He settled into island life, working as a lobsterman, a carpenter, and a handyman to support himself, and built several buildings in addition to his own home and studio. Kent left the island in 1910, eventually settling in upstate New York. Over the course of the ensuing years, Kent traveled extensively, seeking out parts of the world that had striking and rugged landscapes, including Newfoundland, Alaska, Tierra del Fuego, Ireland, and Greenland. He returned to Monhegan, a mature artist, in 1947 and spent summers there until 1953. Kent was a transcendentalist and a mystic in the tradition of Thoreau and Emerson, whose works he read. Landscape by the Sea was purchased by Sam Weir from an auction in New York in 1973, not long after the artist's death in 1971. Weir had written to Kent and later corresponded with his widow, Sally, about purchasing the painting. His interest was apparently sparked by a presumed link between Kent and the Group of Seven. Weir believed, erroneously, that the group owed a debt to Kent and that members of the group had traveled with Kent to Alaska in 1918. Although the Canadian artists, particularly Lauren Harris, admired Kent's paintings and shared an affinity for remote landscapes that was taken up within notions of national identity, there was no direct link between the artists as Weir imagined. A successful and prolific artist earlier in the century, by the 1950s, Kent's artistic reputation had declined. The artist was politically engaged with leftist politics, a socialist, and visited Moscow for the first time in 1950. Kent donated a substantial gift of paintings and prints to the Soviet Union in 1960 and received the Lenin Peace Prize in 1967. It's unclear if Weir was aware of the artist's political leanings, a subject not mentioned in the correspondence, nor was there shared antipathy for abstraction, a topic of discussion. Weir apparently first became aware of Kent through his books. He had received a copy of Kent's account of his trip to Alaska, North by East, as a gift, and owned several other books illustrated by the artist, including Moby Dick. These remain in the library at RiverBrink, an example of the confluence between the artists, between the art gallery, the museum, and the library imagined by Sam Weir. Weir's interest in acquiring a painting appears to have been sparked by Kent's book illustrations and the supposed connection to the Group of Seven. In the course of this correspondence, Weir made several observations about the work of members of the group, none of it very positive. He found their sense of color dull and compared their work unfavorably to the French Impressionists. He disparaged the group for a lack of originality and credited Rockwell Kent as, quote, the spark plug of the Group of Seven, end quote. This may seem surprising to today's audience, but like many artists, the group's reputation has undergone peaks and valleys, and the post-war period and into the early 1960s was one such valley. But Weir's antipathy for their work might also be connected to the development he described in a letter to Rockwell Kent, to the establishment of, quote, a special museum north of Toronto financed by the Ontario government, end quote. This is the McMichael Conservation Collection, now the McMichael Canadian Art Collection. It was a point of pride for Weir, mentioned frequently in his letters, that the art gallery he envisioned in Niagara would be financed entirely by himself and not by the taxpayers of Ontario. And although there are several very nice paintings by members of the group and Tom Thompson, Sam Weir cast a wider net in developing the collection at RiverBrink. When he received Landscape by the Sea, shipped from New York, Weir deemed it a spectacular painting, and I think we can all agree. Thank you very much, and please watch for our next presentation of Weir Wednesday.